Hi everyone and welcome back to Fridays with Fenning. Having had a month's break, over these past few weeks I've managed to have a 10-day holiday in Scotland, attend two great cricket days at the Oval and at Trent Bridge, and have slightly more chilled time at work. But it's September now, it's a new term, and it feels like life is moving forward again after many COVID restrictions have been lifted. It's so lovely, isn't it, being able to travel and see people again, attend concerts and sporting events. But do you sense what I'm beginning to sense, that life is starting to go back to the crazy pace that we were living pre-COVID? Now, I realise that COVID will have made life even busier for some of you. But for many, during lockdown, it prevented us from operating in the same high intensity and especially being confined to our homes so that we couldn't do everything that we were doing beforehand. So we went for walks, we had evenings in, we binged on Netflix box sets, we gardened, we looked out for our neighbours. We made phone calls and Zoomed family members and held Zoom quiz nights. But I have this fear that many of us won't have learnt the importance of slowing down or the value of being as well as doing. And I fear that we'll just get sucked back into the place where everything speeds up and we have no time. No time to discover new walks or to look out for our neighbours and to still shop for them or to WhatsApp family members. No time to appreciate the small things, to notice, to experience this thing called wonder. Children have something that we adults tend to lose as we grow older and busier and we become more cynical in life. And that is this sense of wonder. Somehow children find pleasure in the most ordinary of things that we adults miss because we live life at such a pace. Let me explain what I mean. When my kids were small, and I'm having to go back several years now, I remember arriving home from visiting friends, and instead of rushing into the house at twilight, Sam, Alice and Rachel, my kids, they stayed outside to watch the bats flying around our house. Now, as usual, I was in a rush to run the kids' bath, get the house sorted and get them ready for bed. I was the one who was hassled. The kids, though, were having a ball, screaming rather loudly every time a bat flew past. Now, who gets excited about bats? Well, my kids did, and they seemed to be able to capture the moment and squeeze as much fun out of it as possible. One of my favourite moments happened, I think it was 18 years ago, when I'd taken Alice, who was 8 at the time, to watch Ipswich play at home to Morecambe in the FA Cup third round. Now, Town had scored early and the match was just being played out as usual, and the weather was really cold, and as the game progressed, thick flakes of snow started to fall. And Alice, sitting next to me, turned and she hugged me with a grateful smile on her face, and she said this. She says, "Daddy, this is the best day ever. It's snowing and Ipswich are winning." Now, I realise that both of those things are rare occurrences, but it was a moment of wonder for Alice, and it generated joy and gratitude. And I still want that. Despite soon being 55, I still want to experience joy and gratitude and capture moments of wonder. But how? Well, John Ortberg, a pastor and author, speaks and writes about the discipline of noticing, of taking time to see the wonder in the world around us. And he speaks about seeing God's grace in the ordinary, those undeserved moments of wonder. Now, I've spoken about this several times before because I truly believe that those moments lift our spirits, develop joy, and results in gratitude. So knowing God's grace in the ordinary requires us to see with new eyes. We must learn to see God's everyday grace all around us. And Jesus did this brilliantly. For him, it was just simply apparent that we live in a God-bathed world. And he saw it in nature. He said, "Look at the birds. They don't sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more value than they?" And then he walks out into the fields and he looks at the wild flowers and he says, "Have you ever seen colour and design quite like it? The best dressed people look shabby alongside them." And then he goes on to say this. He says, What I'm trying to do here is to get you to relax, to not be so preoccupied with getting so that you can respond to God's giving. You know, people who don't know God and the way he works fuss over these things, but you know both God and how he works. So steep your life in God reality, God initiative, God provisions. Don't worry about missing out. You'll find all your everyday human concerns will be met. See, Jesus could see God's grace everywhere. And yet I wonder how many ordinary examples of God's grace do we experience every day and yet fail to even notice them. So to notice is a discipline. We need to nurture it in our everyday lives, to slow down and stop and capture and take in these moments of wonder. You know, just looking back during my Scottish holiday, I experienced these moments over and over again. You know, playing links golf with my son-in-law early in the morning and the sun breaking through the sea mist, with the Scottish heather out in flower. And it was so good, and I realised just how lucky I was. You know, beautiful scenery, a great friendship with my son-in-law, playing a game that I love. Honestly, it did my heart so much good. And then later, sitting around the meal table with my family, you know, eating Malteser cake made by my sister. It was so great. I could just go on and on. But what about you? Where have you noticed God's grace in the ordinary recently? You know, those moments of wonder and gratitude. You know, if you're able to, just share them in the comments. I'd really love to know what your moments have been. And here's my thought for you to consider. To prevent the pace of life from taking over and to increase our levels of joy and gratitude, why not begin to practice the discipline of noticing? You know, take the time to stop and stare, to jot down those moments of wonder, those times when you recognize God's grace in the ordinary. You know, they might be found in creation, in a wild flower or a landscape or a weather pattern. It might be found in a relationship, you know, in family times or in laughing with friends. It might even be found in doing the job that you love. But let me encourage you to spend some time and a few minutes today searching for a bit of wonder in the ordinary. And I promise that when you do, you'll discover a little moment of joy that will do your heart good. And as Dave Adamson said on Twitter yesterday, he said, "The earth is crammed with heaven. We just have to look for it." Hey, thanks so much for watching today, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care.